Bartholomew Kuma has finally been pushed past his limits. King Bokori has been, how shall we say, inspired by the events of the Goa Kingdom and has decided to do his own Grey Terminal. And this section has my two favorite panels of this flashback so far. One is that phenomenal close-up of Kuma. All through this flashback, I've been praising Oda for giving this previously completely blank slate character design such a wide range of emotions, and this is a crowning moment, because the rage in this panel is palpable. You, or at the very least, I can feel it. Because at this point, we've gone through, the past 4 or 5 chapters with nothing but suffering. So a month and a half of watching this gentle, kind, and frankly too good to exist man going on a horrific tragedy pub crawl. I think he's more than earned his rage as well as what happens next. But before we get to that, this channel has made it to the final round of La Gala Pirata, in which we are nominated for Best International Content Creator, the winner of which will receive this stunning golden choo-choo. So please do vote via the link in the description, and while you're there, please do vote for Gracia as well. She's one of our channel artists who was nominated for the Best One Piece Illustrator category. Now, I know I said that you wouldn't need to vote again. Turns out I was wrong. But in my defense, the rules are in Spanish, and the rules were also released in batches, and I don't do well with Spanish batches, or Spanish in general. But this is 100% the last time you'll need to vote. Also nominated as a finalist is Arta from the Library of Ohara, who is definitely equally, if not more, deserving than Grand Line Review, so feel free to show him some love as well. But now, back to Kuma. The panel where Kuma obliterates the Sorbet Kingdom castle in the one-man revolution is one of my absolute favorite in the last month or so, because finally this is the moment where we get some sort of release. We finally found the point where we've broken the kindest person to have ever lived, and watching him go scorched earth on King Bokori was magnificent. Better than sex, especially for Kuma, who may or may not know that it even exists. But then Bokori, mate Bokori, he has the audacity to come back again later with the Marines. And then Kuma solos that entire force as well. But this Bokori problem is unbelievably persistent. His fate is left quite vague in this chapter. You just see the ships on fire and the everything. But I don't know if this is the end of Bokori, because I thought we were done with him after the first Sorbet Revolution, but now he's come back 2 more times. He's like a cockroach or a particularly incurable STI. But you know, as much as every detail of this man guy should be despised, the one thing I will give him credit for is persistence. At this point, many former dickwad kings would have given up, adopted a life of eating garbage, defecating toys, creating revolutionary new metal compounds, and becoming multi-billionaires. But that's not the life that King Bokori wants. He's a man of modest desire. He really wants to localize his cockishness, you know? And he also appears to be the person who gave Kuma his tyrant epithet. Which means that when Jinbei was picturing Kuma that one time when the stuff happened, what he was picturing was Bokori's characterization of Kuma. And also, being real, probably alongside some embellishments from Big News Morgans, because the whole Evil King story was published in his newspapers. It says a lot though, that this particular piece of propaganda was so successful that it even had someone as wise as Jinbei believing it. I have to say though, of all of the flashback chapters so far, this one was actually quite delightful. It's the only one thus far where Kuma hasn't endured something horrifying. So Oda's giving Kuma a bit of a break this week before continuing to break him next week. But for now, we're also treated to some lovely light-hearted Bonney, and it's funny because her eating the Toshi no Mi is such a worst case scenario for Kuma. He lied to Bonney saying, yeah, you'll be fine once you physically age to approximately 10 years old. And then she goes and finds the one magical item that can make her do that in an instant. I mean, like, what are the chances? Although, considering Kuma's tragic streak, pretty high. I do wish we saw a little bit more about how Bonney actually found the fruit, because it's not like she stumbled upon it on an adventure or something. It just happened to appear on the island out of the nowhere. Was it always there, wherever there is? If so, why didn't anyone know about it? And if not, who left it there? The most generous answer I can probably give is that the previous Toshi user died relatively nearby, and then the fruit reincarnated in one of Bonney's many daily feasts. But it's just that these devil fruits are incredibly rare items. Each time you find one, it's a major event, or at least it's supposed to be. It doesn't feel like it in this. And I just want a tiny bit more. So let's say it's that last scenario, the one where some dude died and his magical fruit power effed off. All I'd want is 2 extra panels. Firstly, we see Bonney confused because all of a sudden one of her fruits has changed. Then secondly, a close-up of the fruit, and bam, we cut to an adult-bodied Bonney running around. Is it needed? Yeah, I guess not. But it's moments like this that remind me that Oda is on a mission to condense and end One Piece as quickly as he can in a satisfactory way. Everything's worth it for the Connie joke though. I love the running Connie joke. And I'd be really interested to know how much of the Connie stuff was planned out when we saw Bonney take this form at the Reverie. Because it is, a little bit awfully convenient that she just so happens to look like the Dowager Queen despite not being related to her in any way. Fictional pirate logic aside, again, it doesn't matter because this gag is 100% worth it. Every time somebody accidentally picked up Connie, I burst out laughing. There's just something that gets me about picking up a surprisingly cooperative old woman and treating her like a child. I mean, just look at this face. She's so unimpressed, but simply too old and too tired to do anything about it. And there's also a very cool panel of Bonney and Connie together, which is such a nice contrast of energy. You have these two old woman bodies, but one of them is still so youthful and full of life. So at some point, Bonney is going to take Connie's clothing, because when we meet her on Sabadi, that's the hat she was wearing. So I imagine that the world government will probably try and capture her as some sort of Saturn-based plan to get to Kuma. Because at the end of the chapter, Mr. Saturn is shown listening in on Kuma and Vegapunk's conversation, so he knows all about Bonney, the sapphire scales, Kuma's buccaneer blood, and even the connection to Dragon. So she might escape by pretending to be Connie, which is currently the only form she can assume of her own free will. And then with what's his name? I think it's Gyogyo? Gyogyo and the other future Bonney pirates will escort her to freedom. But Bonney, who now has her heart set on being a pirate like her dad, is gonna bully them all into starting a pirate crew, which I kind of love because it means that the whole existence of the Bonney pirates was a horde of grown men essentially humoring a child with grave consequences. And then we come to the section that kind of blew my mind a lot, where Kuma is searching genuinely the whole world for a cure for Bonney. This sequence gave me layers of nostalgia. One, because Kuma obviously visits a whole ton of places that he would then send the Straw Hats later. Secondly, because the whole desperate search for a cure really takes me back to Law and Rocinante. And thirdly, because the sequence itself is structured very similarly to Roger's journey in chapter 967, where we get to see his crew hitting up all of the hotspots. Especially the image of Tequila Wolf, because we see this bridge from the exact same angle looking up, and it's such a great commentary on time. This bridge has been under construction for 700 years, and between Roger and Kuma visiting the bridge is about 2 decades, and it still looks like no progress has been made. Although to be fair, they're definitely visiting different points of the bridge. Some progress has been made, it just doesn't look like it. And I imagine that Kuma probably freed a lot of slaves on Tequila Wolf, and in fact, this is probably a great farming spot for the Revolutionary Army in general. Like, I imagine one of their daily quests is probably to free the infinite amount of slaves that keep appearing on Tequila Wolf, because every day for the last 700 years, a new group of slaves needs to spawn there to keep building it. Although Kuma's first stop was the Torino Kingdom, where he sent Chopper, which is a very reasonable place to search because it has that hidden library packed with highly advanced medical knowledge that no one knows about because everyone assumes that the natives are of primitive intelligence. But Kuma knows better, and it was definitely the correct place to begin. Also, as a side note, because I don't know if I'll ever have another opportunity to point this out, when Chopper returned to the Torino Kingdom, he did so under the alias of Chopper Mask, because he was embarrassed that he came right back. But then post-time skip, we check in on the Torino Kingdom, and several of the tribe children are all dressed like Chopper Mask. So Chopper has his own Soggy King-like persona that's become quite revered, at least in the Torino Kingdom. This is what I love about One Piece. Stupid small details. Funnily enough, Kuma also visits Karakuri Island, which is the place where Frankie was sent, although it's probably better known as the island where Vegapunk was born. So here Kuma was, in a weird way, much closer to the solution to his problems than anywhere else. But if you'd asked me to rank all of the 1000 plus One Piece characters that I expected to see in this flashback, then Jeet and Abdullah would have been close to last. It was such a cool surprise to see them, and in case you don't remember, they're the bounty hunters that appeared in the Corridor Coliseum and are now officially part of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. They originally joined Ideo as part of the very erotically named XXX Gym Martial Arts Alliance, which was then renamed to the Ideo Pirates, perhaps after Shueisha realized that it might not be a great idea to have all them kids googling XXX after reading their magazine. Although in world, I believe it's because they weren't actually pirates when they joined the Grand Fleet, and only subsequently became pirates during their cover story. Doesn't matter though, because I'm actually really glad to see Jeet and Abdullah. Never thought I'd say that. But I'm a sucker for small connective tissue like this. And it's also one of the incredibly rare instances that we get to see some actual bounty hunting in One Piece, even if it doesn't work out, which it never does. And while we don't see Kuma's exact bounty number, we can probably assume that it's 296 million berries, because that's what it was worth when his bounty was frozen when he became a warlord. It's also kind of tragic that Kuma traveled the whole world looking for this answer when he could have just, asked Dragon from the get-go. Because Dragon would have said, yeah, look, I know a guy. Of course, it's more complicated than that, because reaching Vegapunk on Punk Hazard would have been an entirely different matter. But at least Kuma would have had somewhere to, focus his efforts. But then again, if he didn't do the whole travel thing, then he might not have found all of those fun places to send the Straw Hats. All I know is that as a result of this chapter, Caesar Clown is now a load-bearing character. If he didn't throw his tantrum and blow up the Punk Hazard lab, then Stella wouldn't have needed to move his operation to Egghead Island, and Kuma never would have had the opportunity to meet him. Which means that if you remove Caesar Clown from One Piece, then the entire series collapses. No cure for Bonney, which means no life for Bonney. Bonney dead, which means no saving Zoro on Sabati. Zoro slices Charlos, Kizaru gets called early, and One Piece, it's over. In general, telling this Kuma story is not an easy task. Oda is masterfully weaving Kuma's story through the entire recent history of the world, and it's very impressive that he's able to do that without making any contradictions to the very incredibly tangled web he's created. He must have his own personal timeline of events that he refers to for stuff like this. With the rest of the Revolutionary Army, however, at this point, what we've done is we've swapped Ivankov for a Morley, who, in case you don't remember, Morley is 160 years old and was the person who created level 5.5 of Impel Down. Morley was a very old prisoner and in fact technically the first person to ever escape from Impel Down, but it was such a clean escape that no one even noticed it to record it. We also see a young Bello Betty, a pre-open shirt Bello Betty, who gets her position in this chapter, and I get that it's a nice gesture to retire the East Army commander role in remembrance of Ginny, sort of like how sports teams retire certain jersey numbers when their remarkable sports players retire. But at the same time, this is global revolution and this is not a game. And we probably shouldn't leave an entire section of our army without a leader for purely sentimental reasons. And it's also a weird assortment of Revolutionary Army characters that we've gathered here. Bello Betty is part of the East Army, whereas Morley is the West Army commander, and then we have our egg boy Gambo, who is deputy commander of the South Army. Which means that I have no idea where in the world this meeting is taking place, because there's such a random assortment of directional allegiances. But Kuma does eventually meet with Vegapunk, and this moment is something that I've been anticipating with a bit of trepidation. Actually, is it trepidation? Trepidation is the fear that something may happen. But I've seen the fictional pirate future, and I know that something will happen. And I know that as much as this is the cure for Bonney, this is also where we're going to begin to deconstruct Kuma. This wonderful, wonderful man that we've seen evolve is now going to slowly be stripped of everything until there's nothing but a shell left. But on the bright side, Bonney speaking with Sentomaru is adorable. I always love it when people who don't know how to handle children are forced to interact with them, although I think there's a bit of an art error in the chapter. In the panel where Sentomaru holds up his axe with Bonney on it, she doesn't appear to have the sapphire scale drawn in. We're gonna give Oda a pass on that one though, because he did manage to complete a full 17-page chapter this week, so I hope that he's feeling a lot better after what happened a couple of weeks ago. Kuma carrying Bonney in the wooden crate thing is adorable. It's very Demon Slayer, like carrying around a very, very small Nezuko without it being carried around by a very colossal Tanjiro. But what we have here is Big Head Vegapunk, meaning that this is before he decided to lop it off and create Punk Records. And there's a great moment here where both Stella and Kuma are shocked at each other's appearances. Although actually at this stage, I don't even know if I should be calling him Stella. As he appears, I think this is just the OG Vegapunk. There's no sign of any of the satellites, and Vegapunk seems to be a much more well-rounded person, displaying the individual aspects of the future satellites. Part of which is that rather sly moment where he makes a deal with Kuma, because he assumes that Kuma has no cash monies. Good assumption, but this is a very sneaky Lilith-style arrangement, because I feel like the Stella we know right now on Egghead Island would cure Bonney for free. But this is the OG Vegapunk, and he's using the situation to his advantage. However, to be fair, his ultimate goal is to create a legion of heroes to protect people. Although it's a good thing that Kuma said that he was willing to make a deal with the devil to save Bonney, because eventually those heroes are going to be turned into, well, not that. But I do feel like that's the future of One Piece. At some point, the Pacifista will flip due to something built in by Vegapunk and or Kuma, and they actually will become the defenders of peace that both of them originally wanted them to be. Now, of course, Saint Saturn, he's being a bit of a creep and he's listening into the conversation, and there's a lot of big info dropped from his perspective. But one very important thing to note is how freely both Vegapunk and Kuma spoke about Dragon. So the world government has known about Vegapunk's connection to the Revolutionary Army for quite some time. I do like that we're really focusing in on Saturn lately though. For most of the series, the 5 Elder Stars have always seemed like one character to me, because we always saw them together and they had this sinister sinister yet cute habit of always finishing each other's sentences, like some sort of hive mind. So I really like seeing Saturn break out of that, and as subtle as it is, seeing a bit more of his individual personality. I mean, his dialogue is stuff like, I have my own ideas. And it's just so weird to hear an Elder Star speaking in the first person, because they're usually saying these more voyeuristic sentences of just commentating on what other people are doing. So even though it's evil as crap, I'm really keen to see more of Saturn, which is something that I hope we eventually get for the rest of the Elders as well. Although I don't know how likely it'll be to have the other four getting such well-crafted, integrated, and arc-poignant stories. Good news though, no break next week, and it's going to be a very landmark event as well. Chapter 1100, which will mark exactly 1,000 chapters since Dragon first appeared, and also 1,000 chapters since he last did anything of use, which was saving Luffy. Although I guess he did refer Kuma to Vegapunk in this chapter, but only after hiding their connection for like a decade. Dragon also had a very curious line in this chapter. He bid Kuma farewell and he said, "Go where the winds of fate take you, my friend." And as lovely as that is, I honestly can't imagine that the winds of fate have a lot of good parts remaining for our Bartholomew Kuma.